I wanted to talk about an early childhood experience which Americans can and cannot relate to. It's an experience from Europe. I was a little child and I came to travel with my parents because in a vacation they didn't have childcare. And so they tagged me along, and my mother was a translator. And it was one of the beginnings of the European Union meetings, and it was a meeting of the vinegar industry, which was industry-wise interested in lower borders and no tariffs and exchanging not so much ideas, but goods. But what was interesting for me was that there were people in a room who spoke different languages and didn't understand each other. Now, the role of my mother was she was a translator, and it made me actually afterwards learn a couple of languages. She was translating first the head of the vinegar industry, happened to be my grandfather, who was a rather abusive gentleman, and actually not a gentleman, and the side of the Benelux states, which was also a rather abusive gentleman, not a gentleman. Now, what she did was she translated from the French into German and from the German into French. She translated the facts. After she had translated the facts, not the speeches, both men got up and fell into each other's arms, signed a treaties, which was one of the beginnings of what today became the European Union and the United Europe, which is interesting. It was really built on a commercial interest and misunderstanding. What I wanted to talk about, however, was what happened in the minute after they lay in each other's arms. Because another gentleman from Belgium got up, because Belgium is bilingual, and he said, "Would you really believe what you just heard? You should hear what was really said." And he translated the nuances, which included everything but four-letter words. However, the one was the factual language and the other one was the emotional language. They still signed the treaties. I remember distinctly that people were stunned. What made that effect on me was that my mother was fluent in both languages, but that the translation was also really dangerous and a very powerful tool. Today we have some of this in the discussion of fake news, and if you listen to the two major American networks on the left and on the right, you'll find that they describe the same facts very differently, and that they have two realities, and that the people who listen to those two realities are increasingly not able to speak with each other. I guess they'll need my mother as a translator. Now, what I wanted to tell you a little about from my own experience is that I afterwards realized the power of learning languages, which is a thing which really worries me in America, because I see less and less people actually willing and able to learn a foreign language. Even native speakers are forgetting the language they grew up in and don't learn how to read and write in it, which means we become a poorer community. Now, this diaspora of Europe, as you might have guessed from my accent, that's where I hail from, has never been able to agree on a common language which would dominating all the others. And then I thought it was a disadvantage, because when they actually spoke with each other, they spoke English, which was my first exposure to English. I grew up as bilingual French-German, so I could have on the long run done the same thing my mother did, but the neutral language was English. But English in this case was a language of trade. Now, Heidegger, as a philosopher, was always suspicious for me because he said I couldn't learn those languages. As you might have heard, my English isn't exactly accent-free. Now, what Heidegger said has a resonance for me until today, and I fear it. It's called "language is the house of being." Well, in philosophical terms, that actually can be translated in Heideggerian terms as being is a being which in its being cares about nothing but its being. That makes no sense in English. I could also tell you in French, and Sartre couldn't speak German and couldn't read German, l'être est un être qui dans son être ne s'occupe de rien que de son être, which in Sartre's translation became being and nothingness, which means Sartre understood only half, which is more than what you just understood, of the German original being is a being which in its being cares about nothing but its being. This is a sentence which makes no sense because the word Dasein, being, is untranslatable. There are other words which Americans, stationed as GIs in Europe, have always relied on to be untranslatable. One of them is gemütlich, and they normally get closer to it by having a mug of beer in their hand. The mug of beer in the hand might not be essential, but it gets actually to the cultural experience of learning about other cultures. Now, the wrong way is to go to another country, which Germans are famous for doing, and exporting their food by eating exactly what they ate at home. The other way would be to actually explore some of the diversity without doing what Europeans have not been able to do. It's to assimilate. The word assimilation has been out of our agenda for a long time. We have replaced it with political correct language, but it's still in the back of our head because, especially in current times, I have often been told that I shouldn't criticize things in America because I'm not really American. And there is a point which is true in this, but we should actually have the people who come from the outside tell us what we do wrong in the inside. So on the one hand, you need somebody like this Dutch gentleman, actually Dutch-speaking Belgian gentleman, to get up and explain what my grandfather really said and his counterpart really said. On the other hand, we need to be able to have a rational understanding without the emotions. So 2 levels of understanding. And for that sake, we need to learn not just about other cultures, but also other languages. Now, I'm coming to my last point. Heidegger and his follower Gadamer, against whom I wrote my dissertation, said that everything can only be established in a merging of horizons. I dare to differ. Those 2 gentlemen, who were not gentle, they didn't need to merge their horizons. They both came from the nationalistic 19th century past, which Europe has been able to overcome, fortunately, through open borders, but through the tool of trade. Because people who want to make money with each other seem to be able to get closer to each other, and afterwards they find it quite profitable to afterwards learn culture and learn to get along with each other by lowering borders. Now, when you drive from Belgium to the Netherlands, you have no idea where the border is. When you go from Germany to the Czech Republic, there is no border. I think we need to get rid of the idea that borders can protect us. What can protect us is to understand each other. What does it have to do with Heidegger? Heidegger said we cannot overcome our prejudices. He calls them prejudgments. Gadamer says the same. Now, both philosophers, I think, were wrong. Both philosophers like Plato pointed to the art of dialogue. If we have a living dialogue, unlike the monologue you are just listening to, we might actually be able to understand each other better because we could overcome misunderstandings. However, we cannot allow a merging of horizons to make the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time, dominate what we mean and why we mean it. So we should actually be able to find limits where things are just so wrong that we can still agree that they are wrong, and that should be the case in whatever TV channel you get to. And there should be an ability to learn the critical thinking skills to make arguments as logical arguments, which we could translate in any language independently of where our ideology stands or sticks. So what I'm pleading for is to overcome this house of being in language in one side. Because we cannot completely feel with each other doesn't mean that we can't understand what the facts are. And once we have established the facts, it would really greatly help if in dialogue we would actually learn foreign cultures, foreign food, foreign languages. I'll end with a short story when I was sworn into the American National Passport Holder community. I came in and I was a little outside. I had to step out of the chorus line because I had traveled too much. So I was forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance and sing the national anthem alone, which I wish you all luck in doing, especially with my pronunciation. It must have been funny. But the judge said something interesting afterwards. He said, "You freshly coined Americans, you should not give up what you bring to us. You should bring to us that diversity which we are on the verge of losing because we have exchanged it against the vision of a melting pot. And if you have ever cooked with many people and you throw many ingredients in, it's normally not a delicious meal." So I'm pleading for overcoming Heidegger's idea of prejudice. I'm pleading for more dialogue, like Plato actually argued and Gadamer afterwards followed, but I'm also pleading for you to keep your diversity in mind, and if you don't happen to have it at home, explore it, travel, learn a foreign language, and eat foreign food, especially if it's not foreign to you.